So hello and welcome to Making the Right Moves. In this interview series, we're talking to women entrepreneurs who are successfully raising money for their business. We're talking to them about how they're doing it, the lessons they're learning along the way, and the fundraising and business tips they have to share. Today, I am so happy to welcome Funlayo Alabi, CEO of Shea Radiance here in Baltimore, Maryland. Shea Radiance is a natural beauty brand that creates shea butter, hair, and body care products. It's a US-wide brand, and you can find Shea Radiance products in many of the major stores, such as Whole Foods Market, Wegmans, Giant Foods, and other natural and organic retail stores. What is interesting about Shea Radiance is that it's grounded in community, and an integral part of Fumi's brand is to empower the millions of West African women who are her suppliers. She's committed to creating a global network and creating a positive impact for her customers, her women-led suppliers, and in fact, the planet. Fumi, as she likes to be known, is an international speaker. She's a global business leader who has been featured in Forbes magazine, Essence magazine, and several other leading US and international publications. Welcome, welcome, Fumi. I'm so happy to be speaking to you today. So,
thank you, Winsome.
So let's jump right in. When I first met you, I was very impressed by sort of the value chain and the supply chain approach of your business, the fact that you are linking women on one side of the Atlantic with women on the other. Also, I have actually used your products. I have some upstairs and they're excellent.
Thank you.
So I really want to hear about what was the idea behind starting the business and how you've successfully raised funding along the way.
Of course, Winsome, thank you for having me here this morning. It's such an honor and privilege to get to share, parts of my story. And I'm hoping that our story will encourage some other women to be able to do the great things because the world needs what we have right now. So how did we start our business? It's never one thing that causes you to start a business. It's a multiple things that are constantly going on in your head, in your mind, and your environment, and then you find the thing. But I would say that I came to Shea Radiance because we were trying to solve a problem that we had in my family. So this was over 10 years ago. My kids were still young. My older son had extremely dry skin because he had some kidney problems that left him dehydrated. And my last son had eczema. And my husband and I also have extremely dry skin. And, we went to all the mass market stores. We went to specialty stores. We would buy lotions, creams, but nothing seemed to work. It's like the moment you put it on the skin sucks it in, and then you're ashy. And I don't know how it is in your culture, but I know that in the African culture, and I would venture to say Black culture in general, we put a lot of premium on the way our skin looks. So if your child turns up to school looking ashy, the first thought, if the teacher is a person of color, is like, oh my goodness, nobody loves this child.
Yeah, right? Here's some cream.
Yes. Any Black woman around will look into her purse and try and lotion that child down, because in our community, looking well-groomed, looking well-lotioned is a sign that you are loved and a sign that someone has taken the time to look at you. So you can imagine my chagrin, even though I had lotioned these boys up, by the time they got on the school bus, they were looking dusty. And I was like, this isn't right. I'm embarrassed, and then I look at my own skin, it was super dry. And so what we started doing was we started mixing products in our kitchen. I knew from growing up that shea butter was a huge part of the African apothecary of beauty. Mm-hmm. And even though a lot of people were no longer really using it the way our grandparents did, people used it for things like eczema, burns, and so many other things. And so I asked my mother to bring me a sample when she was visiting from Nigeria. She did, and we started adding it to different oils we were mixing in the kitchen. And I used the shea butter on my kids' skin for about a week, and the transformation was amazing. And what I realized from that point was that all the lotions that were being mass manufactured were not made with the basic skincare needs that I had. And I venture to say that most people of color had. Their lotions were too dry. Their lotions, when you read the ingredient list, had very little natural ingredients. They were using mineral oil, petrolatum, and maybe a sprinkling of natural oils. What we found was that we needed products that were rich, moisturizing, full of natural oils and butters. And that's really the secret to keeping Black skin looking glowy and our kids not looking ashy. So I would say what got us into this business was solving our kids' skincare problems. And then the next thing was that we started taking these solutions to our local farmers market. We felt that there was a market out there. And I would work my job in DC during the week. And then on weekends, my husband and I would mix these products, put them in jars, and we would go to the local farmers market, which was a mixed market. It was very diverse. And we would just teach people about the benefits of shea butter, and we would sell. And that's when we realized, like, okay, we have a business, we're meeting a need. And finally, as things started to grow, we realized that we needed to source the shea butter. And I don't know if you know this, there's two types of shea butter. There's a shea butter that cosmetic companies source, which is a refined shea butter. It's very white. It's a great emollient, but because cosmetic companies like things to be very standard, they don't like the crude shea butter. And so
the raw shea butter.
Yes. So they take that raw, and what they do is they put it through a number of processes. Some of it is natural, a lot of it is chemical. They strip the color, they strip the scent, and what they have is a very stable emollient. And that's what they prefer to use when they do cosmetic manufacturing.
Okay.
Yes. I, on the other hand, knew that the power of shea butter is actually in the things that they were stripping out. Natural shea butter has tritterpene esters, and that's where all the collagen stimulating power of the shea butter is. That is where the UV protection is. That is where the anti-inflammatory power is. And so we knew that if we were going to make products that were going to work, we had to get the crude shea butter that hadn't been stripped. And that's when we started going back to West Africa, to different countries, into the shea producing communities, so we could source the raw shea butter directly.
So you're using the raw shea butter unprocessed in your creams and lotions?
Yes, we use that as the base.
Excellent.
Yep.
No wonder it's so good.
Thank you.
No wonder it's so good. So tell me a little bit about how you financed in those early days.
Yes. So in the early days, we self-financed. And when I say self-financed, it means that we drew out of our 401k savings. In the early days, we were actually going to the source to get the butter. And also it required a little bit of an investment, because this industry, the shea industry, is really under-supported in many of these countries. The women themselves don't have the ability to scale. They don't have the ability to buy nuts if they're not picking it themselves. They don't have the ability to get bigger baskets, bigger equipment to help them process. So when we were coming into these communities and wanting them to produce in bulk so that we could save money by shipping large amounts, we realized that they didn't have the capacity. And so what was happening was that we were putting our savings into the supply chain. So we started off with a lot of our 401k going into building the business in the early years. And we were using a lot of our personal money to start off with.
Mm-hmm. So at what point did you decide to go for other kinds of financing?
Yes, so my background is, I have a business background, but nothing really prepares you for entrepreneurship, and nothing prepares you for an industry that actually has a way of working that if you don't understand it, you go in there a little bit blind. And, you know, when we started over 10 years ago, there was a growing indie beauty world that, you know, most people were used to getting their lotions and creams from Procter & Gamble, Unilever. These are large cosmetic companies that produce at scale, that own the store shelves, that, you know, they just had a lot of power. And we didn't realize that going in and wanting to sit next to these extremely powerful brands, we didn't know what it took, right? All I know is that we make great lotion. And I thought that, yes, now that we have this great lotion, we'll go out there, we'll buy, and then people will pay us, and then we can finance our business off the margins, because we felt that we had priced our products well. We had, you know, done everything. I mean, on paper, we looked like we should be really profitable and that we should be able to self-finance. The reality is that we had no idea that we were so underfinanced until we started getting into the stores and realizing that the way the supply chain works is that you tie up money in raw material working in Africa. So 3-4 months, you have lots of money tied up in there. Get into a store, the store says, yes, we're going to bring you in, but guess what? We're not going to pay you for 30 days. And then you're buying inventory, packaging, labels, and you're not going to buy, you know, if you get an order for 1,000 pieces, you're not ordering 1,000 labels, you're ordering 10,000 labels because you have to save. And so we got into this business being so naive about how much money we really needed. We totally underestimated our capital needs. And that's when we started having a lot of problems. And that's when we started, you know, looking for other sources of funding. And one of the first sources of funding we got was from an accelerator we joined. We got $25,000 from the Conscious Venture Lab. And then we also looked into convertible notes from some other connections we've made. And they were actually small. I mean, I look back and say small convertible notes, but at that time, it was really what we needed. I think each one was $25,000. So we've kind of like grabbed little bits of money along the way. But Winsome, can I tell you that it still wasn't enough?
So when just for folks who don't know, convertible notes are essentially loans, no?
They are loans that can convert into equity.
Did you convert?
We didn't convert.
Okay, you paid back before the trigger.
Yes, so basically, depending on who you're borrowing from, they can be patient and they can keep renewing the convertible notes and not letting it convert till you can pay them. And we were very fortunate to find people who just wanted to see us succeed. So they're like, you know what?
They just roll it over.
They just keep rolling it over. But that was one way of raising funds in a way that was non-dilutive to our equity, because—
Which means you didn't have to give up equity.
Not yet, no.
Not yet. Okay, continue.
So, and you know, the whole equity conversation is another one to have, because I think we need to kind of understand, you know, what it means and know when you're ready to do it.
Yeah, we need to talk about that. So are you, so I'm sort of taking you along to get to the point of equity, because I think you have we have a lot to unpack here, because you've used various different types of financing, depending on where you were in the business. So I'd like to sort of tell that story to folks who are watching this.
Okay,
go ahead. Sorry.
So so I mean, I'll stop right there and take the next question, because I could go on.
Well, no, but I want you to continue with this along this line of thought, because you're saying you're moving from self-financing to convertible notes that, if I'm correct, up to this point have not yet converted, because your investors are patient. They're willing to forgo equity
Yes.
And they're just simply rolling over these essentially loans.
Yes.
For, into the future because they're vested in the success of the company.
Yes.
Right. Which
yes.
is, I mean, not too many people have that, have that good fortune to have those kinds of investors who sort of walk with you long term and will defer their equity investment until a later point.
Yes, and one of the things, one thing I do want to put out there is that you will find good people as you're building your business with passion and focus, and you are getting out of your business to network, take the time to become parts of groups. When someone asks you to speak or to share, that you're putting yourself out there. A lot of the time, our businesses can be so consuming that we don't take time out to look at the landscape and see, where else do I need to go to get help? And I think that for me, finding really great people came when I stepped out of my office, out of the day-to-day grind, to talk to people, to share with them where I was, what I was struggling with. And it's almost like these people heard my story, and they're like, Funlayo, we would like to help you. So don't underestimate the power of being out there and letting people know what your needs are. The right people will show up to support you.
That's a very important tip you're giving away early, because usually we talk about this at the end, but great. So at what point, before I get to the equity discussion, at what point did you approach a bank?
From day one, we approached banks, and the banks always said no. They didn't understand our business model. We were not profitable. Everything looked really risky to them. So we don't fit the typical bank model as a beauty brand, because banks are used to seeing either they will finance you if you already have profit, which we didn't have, or if you have the right connections and someone to vouch for you. And so I am saying that after several attempts at approaching the banks, I just decided that the banks were not for me because they didn't understand my business. And also there is that added layer of built-in bias that whether they want to admit it or not, they're not taking chances on Black women. At least they weren't back in the day.
Yeah.
So the banks were not a good fit.
So are you still not looking at commercial banks as a source, or was there at some point where they said yes?
I mean, my banks have given me a line of credit, a small line, but in terms of where the financing from my business comes from, it is not from traditional banks. Not at all.
That's interesting. That's very interesting.
I know
because
that
a lot
some
of entrepreneurs think.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying a lot of entrepreneurs seem to think that, you either have to self-finance or somehow get some grants to kind of get you going. And then the next logical step would be a commercial bank loan. So it's interesting that you have chosen, based on experience, another path.
Yes. I just found, unless you are a contractor where you're working with government contracts and they kind of understand the entire cycle of how your revenues come in, they're very hesitant to finance retail businesses. And the truth is that when you start a business like mine, you are not immediately profitable.
Oh, obviously.
You're fine, but I mean, I was always kicking myself. I'm like, I must really be an awful business person. We're not why aren't we making a profit? And but it was, and the cash flow is always tight, even when you have a good model. Cash flow is always tight just because of the way the business runs. And one of the best things that happened to me, Winsome, was after many years of just beating myself up and kind of struggling, was meeting a finance accountant who had a lot of experience in my industry. And I had her look at my books, and I had her be able to tell the story of what we were doing in the business. And based on her experience, she was like, Funlayo, based on the limited amount of finances you have coming in, and based on X, Y, and Z that you have going on, you do have a good business. Here is what you need. This is where you need to focus, and this is the amount of money you need to raise to really grow your business to be able to meet all these milestones that I know you're capable of. So it was almost like having someone else come in. It's almost like a finance therapist, really, and take a look and say, you know what? This is what you're missing. This is what you need to focus on, and all will be good. So that was very helpful. And that was even fairly recently.
No, that's good, because one of my other interviewees made the point that, she was saying you need to get your books in order, in any event, even if you're not looking for money. But then if you are looking for money, your books are going to tell the story, right?
Absolutely.
And you have to be able to use your numbers to tell that story.
Yes.
To a funder. So I'm glad to see that you had somebody who could sort of cut through things and do that for you.
Yes. And I want to also share that, the story might not be, oh, look at all the profit we made, but having your books in order really helps you tell the story of the why.
Mm-hmm.
It tells the stories of the struggles. It tells the stories of where you invested and thought you were going to get a return and it didn't work, or where you invested and the results was really good. So sometimes as women and women of color, we think that everything has to be perfect for us to have the right to be able to stand and ask for what we need.
Exactly.
But it doesn't have to be, because one of the things I've seen over the past decade is just the confidence that other groups, especially white men, have, where they will draw out a concept on the back of a napkin.
Yes.
And they'll go ask for $1 million and they have not sold one product.
Precisely.
And I'm like,
how are they doing that? They can convince.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
But they have the confidence. Obviously, they have the network. People have more confidence in them. I mean, these businesses, many of them do not succeed, but they have
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, because they could talk convincingly and have people buy
into it.
Yes.
And so a lot of the time, many of us are working underfunded, working really hard, not paying ourselves, thinking that, we have to get to this milestone to be able to ask. And it's not true. Mm-hmm. It's not true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That is true. So one question I had is, obviously you've had challenges along the way. Mm-hmm. What are some of the challenges you faced from startup through to now? Mm-hmm. Have there been, obviously you talked a little bit about financing and having to sort of find your way and really figure out a new model, if you will, around convertible notes. And I'm still going to come back to the equity discussion, mm-hmm. but I just wanted to ask you about the challenges first, and sort of what sort of lessons are embedded in those challenges.
Of course. So, when you're a business owner, you go into business because you are passionate about a particular thing and you become really good about solving that problem. So for us, we make amazing lotions. When it comes to branding, packaging, that is my jam. I love everything to do with that.
I know you got a very attractive logo and all of that.
Thank you.
Yes.
This is what I love. But there are so many, but even though that is the heart of the business, everything else to make the business a success is typically what most entrepreneurs may be lacking. Mm-hmm. So it's not enough to have the best widget. It's not enough to have the best lotion or the best, service. You really need a team mm-hmm. to help you grow and scale your business. And you grow and scale by knowing what your business model is, what you can afford to do at a particular point in time, and some things you should say no to. Mm-hmm. So one of the first big challenges that almost broke us many years ago was because we were very good at making products and very good at packaging and branding. We had the opportunity very early on, I think 3 years into building the business, to go into Target. We had a line of natural hair care products. That was the time, that the natural hair care movement was growing. One of their buyers had seen us at an event, and they were like, we think this would look good in Target. And I was like, my husband and I were like, thank you, Lord, the breakthrough is here. Because prior to that time, we had a lot of small stores. We had some local Whole Food stores. I think it was 26 Whole Food stores. We had maybe about 100 stores we were in. And we still, we were still struggling, even though we were meeting, those accounts were growing. But with Target, we're like, this is it.
Nirvana.
The Lord has answered our prayers.
Right?
Yes. But what we didn't know was that when you go into a big box store, you really need to raise at least $500,000 in order to be successful. Because here's what's happening. Here's what's going to happen. They're going to put in a purchase order, and it's going to be pretty big. And you're going to run around scaling your operations to be able to meet this purchase order, because there will be more to come. Right. And if you're not properly financed, you'll beg, borrow, steal, do whatever you have to do to make sure that you fill that first purchase order. But that's just one of the many steps to be successful in retail. Before that order is leaving your warehouse, you need a marketing team that's going to come up with a marketing plan on how you're going to promote the heck out of your launch into that store. Because guess what? Even though I spend way too much time in Target, roaming the aisles, my eyes are only hitting the brands that maybe I've seen on TV or I've seen on social media or are doing something else. And so if you are not promoting your brand, even though you are in Target or Whole Foods or Walmart, people are not going to be looking for you. So Target, really, all they're doing is leasing you space to put your product, and then you have to drive the traffic there. And in order to do that, you need money and expertise. You also need to be able to run promotions. And guess what? When you get that 20% off, 50% off, or that $1 off your purchase, you, the manufacturer, are paying for it. Of course. Because it's the privilege of going into a big box store. They're not doing the work. It's on you. Right. Yes. Yeah. So we didn't take full account of just how expensive it would be to be in a big box store. We were just very excited and very proud that our products were good enough to be able to sit in such a prestigious location. And what happened was, after we did all the work and got the order out, there were lots of bumps along the way. They didn't merchandise it properly. We would go into the store, there would be no products, even though we had shipped it in. There were so many things going on that the launch wasn't successful. And our subsequent ability to maintain the shelf space was a complete failure. We never got another purchase order. And typically, if your product is not doing well in the store, they will pull you off and you have to pay them to pull you off. So wow. That was a time that we were completely devastated as a small brand. And it's what happens is actually not unusual. When it happens to big brands, they have the buffer, the cushion to do that, to get through it, kind of revamp, reorganize, and then hit it again. And they also have a team. They have a team who helps with the merchandising, that is helping talk to Target and doing all those things. We didn't have much of anything. And so when that went south, we actually saw our business imploding. Wow. And, we were in so much debt. It was a horrible time. And I think that we got to a point where, we found an advisor and we're like, okay, what should we do? And this advisor said, Funlayo, I cannot tell you what to do, because I can tell you what it looks like. Financially, you guys are in big trouble. So we had a big decision to make. Should we just fold it in and say, you know, we tried and failed, or, you know, what should we do? And, you know, at this point, we were already sourcing our raw material from a couple of women's groups in Nigeria. And one of the things, every time I would go out to that community, was that I'll tell them that, you know, we're growing our business in the US. And, you know, as we grow our business, we will continue to order from you. And, you know, you and I are going to grow together. And a lot of the time, the women would be skeptical because they had had people come through the communities and promise to buy things, and the people never even showed up to buy what they had made for them. And we had made a promise that we would not be that kind of customer, that if we made a pledge, we would buy. And so I just thought about the promises we had made. I thought about the customers who really liked our product. And my husband and I decided that we were not going to shut Shea Radiance down, that we were going to figure out a way to make it work. So we had to shrink the business back down. We had to move the business into our basement. We sought out advice, and we decided that we would literally start the business again. And what that entailed was me going back to some of the stores that we had not serviced because we were chasing after a bigger account, and start courting them again. I spent a lot of my time on the road, going from store to store to store, talking to the buyers about bringing us back in and expanding. So really our growth back from that was a very slow but very organic growth, because we didn't have money, we didn't have investors, and we just started it from scratch because we felt that we had an obligation to figure out a way to succeed because there was a lot riding on it. So
give us an idea of the time frame, the timing and the time frame of, you know, that road back. Yes. Obviously, it wasn't an instantaneous thing. Let's give it a sense of time, a year, 18 months. What?
I mean, literally, it took years, because at this point, we still didn't have funding, right? So everything just getting back from going back and stabilizing and building these relationships took a little while. Now, if we had gotten funding, one of the things that I would have invested in at a very early stage was to be able to afford experts, like a marketing, a sales expert, someone who could just do that part of expanding the business very quickly. But I didn't have that option. And so we continued to build back slowly, doing the organic way. The other thing we did was we got some advisors around us that we could talk to about, you know, the next steps that we needed to take in business. When opportunities would present themselves, we learned better how to evaluate opportunities. And I have to put in a plug for the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Program, because while in that program, I really had an opportunity to have the tools to do a risk assessment about every opportunity that was coming my way, and to figure out, do we have the resources to take advantage of this opportunity, or is it going to turn us inside out again? And so that whole mindset that not every opportunity is a great opportunity, that's where it came from, just this situation we went through. People have come to me and they're like, oh, Funlayo, there's an opportunity to open a kiosk somewhere here or in the airport or do all that. Well, having done a kiosk in a mall for 2 months when I first quit my job to start running this business, I know all that goes into running a retail space. You have to be there for 10, 12 hours. If a team member doesn't show up, you're it. You know, there's so much going on that I can immediately evaluate an opportunity and know that based on the way we're set up, that's not going to work. And so lots of opportunities have come, and it's like, yes, that looks really good. Wow, that would be great for my revenues. But at the end of the day, because it's not a good fit for us, our revenues will jump, but we're also going to lose a lot more money, and we don't have the capabilities to handle it. So that experience was humbling. That experience, starting from scratch again, after this big hoopla about, oh, you're in Target, you must be really wonderful, you must be very successful, and you must be making millions. You know, you have to really check your ego if you really want to grow your business. You don't want to believe the hype of what people are thinking and saying or imagining where you are. You look realistically at your numbers. And if your numbers say you really need to go out and knock on some doors and talk to some people, that's what you need to do.
Mm-hmm.
So those are some of the lessons that I have learned along the way to building
No,
business to this point. Yep.
no. This is great. So the Goldman Sachs program, when you were in the middle of the rebuilding process, that's when you went to Goldman.
Yes.
Well, it was very timely, I would say.
It was very timely, really great tools, because the Goldman program really is for people who are already in business.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like an MBA course for entrepreneurs. If you have an MBA and you're not an entrepreneur, you have an MBA to work a corporate job, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, clearly defined models about how to do things. But when you have a startup, when you have a small business, the skills and tools that you need are similar but quite different, because you are the CEO and you literally have to understand how all the different levels of your business are supposed to work. You're supposed to understand your financials in addition to everything else. And so this program was designed for that CEO type person, a completely different type of training from what you would get in your traditional MBA program.
Mm. Interesting. Very, very good. So where are you now in the business in terms of the business's development and specifically around financing?
So right now we are in fundraising mode.
Mm-hmm.
We've built out our models and projections for the next 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And based on where we want to be in the next 5 years, based on how we see the beauty industry, based on the opportunities that we see in the beauty business. And Winsome, I want to go back a little bit, because sometimes when we talk about finances, we sometimes forget about the why, the whole reason why we're getting to the point of finances. And that will always be the driver, because some of us are not super financially inclined. It can be so overwhelming. You're like, I don't want to deal with this.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to encourage you to let your why drive you to get the help and the training you need to understand your financials. So one of the things that we have found, especially since the pandemic and the murder of George Floyd, is that there's more data out there about the state of Black people's buying habits and patterns.
Mm-hmm.
And in my industry, McKinsey put out a study about Black women and the beauty industry. And one of the things the McKinsey study shows was that Black customers are 3 times more likely to be dissatisfied with the products that they're buying in store. I can say amen to that, because that was my issue.
Right. A
lot of Black people, even back then, they would buy Jergens and everything, and they would still go back home and add rose water, aloe vera, mineral oil. I don't know.
Yes.
Yes. You would still have to
re-engineer, right.
Rework it. And then the other thing is that Black people, the African-American customer, is twice as likely to support another Black-owned brand, right? The reason I'm saying this is that we're looking at the opportunities. And then we also know that in terms of the brands that are represented in the market, even though Black customers, they say we over-index in beauty, meaning that we invest a lot in beauty, in hair, in skincare, all those things. We're 12% of the population and we buy 11%, right? And the reason we do it, I can speak personally. I'm not a product girl, but I do know that I like to take care of my skin. And I've also bought a lot of really bad products that were not meant for me, sitting under my kitchen sink till I find the one that I really like. Right. And so in the midst of having more data, I found a reason to know that there was a lot of opportunity for our business to grow. So the McKinsey study also gave us some information about the market size of the beauty industry. and that the fact that the industry was growing at a 5% rate, and that in 5 years, the Black beauty portion of the entire beauty market, which is about 11%, would be about $9 billion. So based on this information, we looked and said, what if we could capture not 1%, not 0.5%, but even just 0.25%
of that
this
market
business? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
How will that affect our business model? And then from there, we kind of backward engineered our numbers to this target. And we
Mm-hmm.
figured out that in order for us to get there from where we are, we would need to raise this amount now, and then in 2 or 3 years, raise this amount. Now, I didn't do this in a silo. I had Janet, my financial modeling expert, work with me.
Mm-hmm.
As a
Mm-hmm.
CEO, it was my job to do the research and see what the potential is, but I still needed help putting my figures together, because if it was left to me, I wouldn't know that number. I would spend so much time playing around in spreadsheets. I would never emerge with a number. So having the ability to pay for a really good finance person to help me reimagine what those numbers would look like was helpful. And then based on that, I said, okay, I think we're ready to go out and
Mm-hmm.
raise funds. We're ready to scale this business in a meaningful way. We already have really great accounts. We know what we need to do to triple our sales there. If we have this amount of cash, let's go out and do it. And so that's where we are in our journey right now. We are going out, we're going to raise funds. We have 2 options. If we find friendly investors to do a convertible note, we'll take it. If we bring on an equity partner, they have to be aligned with our missions and values. They have to be patient, and they have to come to the table with the expertise to help us reach our goals.
I'm so happy you said that, because I was talking to another business person, not on this interview series, but separately, talking about the fact that equity investing is like a marriage for that investor, and you have to be aligned, because they were also looking for financing, a rather significant amount of financing. And I was saying, all the more reason to make sure that they're aligned with your values, with your mission, and so on. Otherwise, it could be a nightmare. They'll bring the money, yes, but you got to work with this person. Ideally, they're going to be bringing expertise. They're going to be bringing access to networks and other things.
Yes.
So you have to make sure that if they're going to be in your business, and sometimes they ask for, a seat on the board or to be a formal advisor, whatever it might be, that this is someone you can work with over the long term.
Yes.
Because if not, that'll be another headache that you have to deal with.
I've heard some horror stories
of
CEOs being pushed out of their companies by the
absolutely.
board.
Absolutely. So back to convertible notes, you're thinking of the same kind of arrangement where you'll have a rollover, or you're contemplating conversion to equity at some point for these new investors?
For the new investors, yes. So the model shows that we would be able to pay off a certain portion of the convertible notes. But I'm also open, when people have confidence in you and they invest in you, to give them an opportunity to have a stake in the success too. So we haven't really gone deep into what the convertible note will look like right now, because we're still sending out the decks and they're calling us back to pitch and everything. But I'm a great believer in making things win-win, right? That if you can help us get to our goals and you are a good partner, then when we exit in 5 years, everybody should be happy. And if getting your cash back with interest is what you want, fine. If you want to hang in there a little longer to an exit and you're willing to take more of a risk, and it's a win, then we should all win. We should all be happy.
And also you have to be mindful of your early investors, those convertible note holders who have been rolling over. If you're bringing in new investors, you have to make sure those guys, their interests are protected, right? So
absolutely.
Because they took bets on you very early.
Very early, and they didn't stress me out.
Exactly. Even when things were going south, they were still hanging in there with you, right?
It was, and yeah, those were the people who were saying, hang in there.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm telling you, Winsome, you cannot really build a business as a woman and an independent person without a community of people who really want you to succeed. Because some days are just going to be really awful. You'll struggle to make payroll, things will break down, people won't show up. And, you know, sometimes a phone call from a friendly advisor or something is really what gives you the energy to continue. And the reason I really wanted to be on this sort of podcast, but this series with you is I want to encourage people not to quit. You know, sometimes it's really hard when you don't have the financing, not to quit, but if things are rough, you know, just take a minute and figure out what do you really need to make it till the next week or the week after. And then go out of your comfort zone and find people that you can talk to who can help you. There's always, you know, and then if you also need to change, if you need to take a class, if you need whatever you need. I mean, I have changed so much as an entrepreneur. I am not the same woman I was when I started this business. There's a level of confidence you get from overcoming adversity, and there's so much humility that comes from running your own business that I can't even begin to explain because you've seen it all. So, yeah. And yeah, go ahead.
No. I'm just nodding my head because I think this is so on point. Because one of the motivations for DevSolutions to start the series is simply to shine a light on women like you who are, you know, really doing things in their space. They might not be famous, you know, internationally, but they're actually making a contribution not only to the community, but also building a business in a very deliberate way. And so each of the women I've spoken to so far, including yourself, have each taken a different path to financing. And I think each of you has been giving me interesting and valuable information for folks who are now starting the journey.
Yeah.
So,
and I think that our journeys as women of color, I mean, what you're doing really, you're putting out different business models so people can see themselves in it. Because when I started, the model I saw was mostly people in tech who could raise a lot of money, have a great lifestyle while they were building their business, right? And travel and do all this fun, exciting stuff. I mean, I've had a chance to travel. I've been to some amazing places and do a lot of things, but it wasn't easy for me because I was paying my way. You know, I didn't have the investor dollars. And so when we see people who look like us, who are doing it, it helps us to feel more confident that, you know, I may not have built it like, you know, this dude over here where everything looked so easy and he started the business with a staff of 10 and he had a manager of this, a CMO and everything. Well, you know, maybe I can look at these models of how these women started and get hope from that and maybe improve on what they've done and know I can do better. Sometimes we need to see it to be it. We need to see the differences in ways that you can build a successful business that is not very mainstream. And I am all about defying certain laws of economics and physics, because I also believe that on a spiritual level, I serve a God of abundance. And the only thing that is typically lacking is imagination. I know that, you know, we're told as business people that, you know, if you don't have money in your account, if you run out of cash, your business is over. While that might be technically true, I have found it not to be true with me. Because there have been many times it's been empty and I've sat down and the ideas on how to get the next amount of money I need to get us through comes to my mind. So let's not leave out the spiritual component, because if we're just going by the regular rules, you know, of scarcity, of, you know, we all have to struggle and fight each other to be able to access what we need. I want us to kind of defy those rules and create our own rule book.
No, that's well said, because the whole idea of abundance and the spiritual approach to abundance is very important. You know, I think creativity is very critical here, because many times, as you say, you're at the end of the rope or the end of the road rather. And, you know, sometimes just sitting quietly and thinking through possible solutions, you'd be surprised what you can find. I mean, I get my best ideas on the treadmill in the morning, right? So, because you're sort of in a meditative state and you can really, you know, brainstorm and receive very innovative ideas in that state. So I'm really happy that we were able to have this conversation. Any last words of wisdom? I mean, you've been sprinkling these gems throughout the conversation. I'm so appreciative because all of them have been on point. Similar yet different to some of the other folks I've spoken to, but this has really been a very rich conversation. So I'd like to close with any last words of advice that you have that you'd like to share.
Sure. I think the thing that you mentioned about getting some great ideas when you're on the treadmill, self-care is so important as you make this journey as a business owner, because if you don't take care of yourself, you're really not going to be present to do everything that you have to do, because it's so tempting to see all the work and everything that is there and say, I can't afford to exercise, I can't afford to eat right, you know, because of the time, and, you know, I have all these things. You have to invest in yourself. You have to invest in your mental well-being. You have to get on the treadmill or go to the gym or do your yoga or whatever it is you need to do to gather yourself together. Because once you invest in yourself, once your cup is full, you have enough to pour out into your business and your family. So yes, I know this is a numbers and a finance presentation, but at the end of it all, you, whoever is listening to this, you, that woman, you have to invest in yourself. And like when someone was saying, getting on that treadmill, I cannot tell you how many problems I got the solution while I was in the gym.
So there you go. Amen to that. It's true. It's very, very true. Well, thank you so much, Fumi, for this discussion. Again, it's been very, very interesting for me. I certainly learned a lot about the store, going into a store such as Target, the process. I knew it was difficult and challenging, but there are some gems that you shared that I really didn't know. And so it suggests that if you are sort of a woman running this kind of business such as yours, you have to be very careful about timing when you go into this kind of big box scenario, because it takes a lot of resources and you have to be prepared for it and you have to know what you're getting into, right? So, I mean, obviously a lot of folks who are selling products, the goal is to get into a Target or, you know, to work with Amazon or, you know, one of these big organizations, big companies, but you have to be ready. And so that's one of the big lessons I'm taking from this as well. That, and the other thing is the fact about, you know, other people seeing you in Target and thinking that you're doing so well, and all what that brings. There is a certain humility that has to come from being a business person in that scenario. So you keep your head on straight, you keep things in perspective, because otherwise, you know, it could be a disaster, right?
Yeah.
So thank you so much. I wish you all the best in your fundraising. I know it's a long process. I know it's challenging, and you have to really be able to discern a good deal and a good investor from the rest. And so it's a patient process as well. You have to really realize it's not a slam dunk. It's not an overnight thing.
Mm.
But at the end of the day, if you get a good investor or good investors who are willing to walk with you, it could be invaluable, more so even than, say, getting a loan from a bank that doesn't come with what they call smart capital the way Equity does.
Thank you so much, Winsome. This was a privilege. Thank you.
Take care.